On a bill that came over from the House, House Bill 2533, and somebody ran up the stairs, so we're going to give her just a second to catch her breath, and then Jenna will give us a review on this bill.
Good morning, committee. Madam Chair, this is House Bill 2533, which is the Occupational Therapy Licensure Compact. It would provide interstate practice privileges to occupational therapists and occupational therapy assistants. Article 1 states that the purpose of Occupational Therapy Licensure Compact is to facilitate the interstate practice of occupational therapy with the goal of improving public access to occupational therapy. The compact preserves regulatory of states to protect public health and safety. Article 1 also states purposes and objectives of the compact, which include the state's ability to protect public health and safety, encouraging cooperation of member states, supporting spouses of military members, and enhancing exchange of licensure information between states. Article 2 defines terms in the compact, including occupational therapist and occupational therapy assistant. Article 3 sets forth the criteria for states to participate in the compact, and to participate, a member state must license occupational therapists and OT assistants, participate in the Commission's data system, have a mechanism in place for receiving and investigating complaints, implement or utilize procedures for considering criminal history records of applicants, comply with rules of commission, utilizing a national examination as a requirement for licensure. Article 4 sets forth the requirements for an individual to participate in a compact. Those include holding an active home state license and satisfying applicable state statutory requirements. The article further sets forth the procedures for loss of compact privilege following encumbrance of a home state license. Article 5 outlines the process for a licensee obtaining a new home state license because you can only have one home state license at a time. Article 6 sets forth the procedures for active duty military personnel or their spouses and where they can designate a home state. Article 7 outlines adverse actions, so a member state can investigate or impose adverse actions on licensees according to both this act and state law. Article 8 sets forth the Occupational Therapy Compact Commission and designates the commission's duties and powers. Article 9, and I should state that there was a technical change in Article 8, and we just added the words, the executive committee, on page 10, line 7, just to align with some compact language, a compact term. And then that brings us to Article 8, establishing the OT Compact Commission and designates that commission's power and duties. Article 9 requires the commission provide for development, maintenance, and utilization of a database to share information concerning licensure and applicants. Article 10 requires the commission adopt reasonable rules to implement and administer the compact. Article 11 sets forth the rules for oversight, default, termination, and dispute resolution. Article 12 states that the effective date of the commission is upon passage in the 10th member state, and currently there's about 30 members of the OT compact, including Colorado, Nebraska, and Missouri, and 3 states started issuing privileges beginning this January. Article 13 contains a severability clause, which this committee should be fairly familiar with through other legislation. And Article 14 provides nothing in the compact will prevent or inhibit the enforcement of the compact or of other state law or regulation. This bill would take effect on July 1st, 2026, after publication of the statute book. There was that technical amendment I mentioned, and the bill passed the House on a vote of 121-0. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Jenna Committee? Senator Petty.
Glad you mentioned the technical, because I was trying to figure out, okay, what did the House do? So you mentioned within the bill that about having investigative information regarding licensure, and so does that mean that that within the state of Kansas that there would have to the occupational therapists, their association would have to maintain records about their membership? So in case there was any kind of, is that part of the compact?
If there is disciplinary information about an occupational therapist under the commission, that information would have to be shared with the database for the compact, and they should be keeping records, the occupational therapy licensure, the board, which would be the Board of Healing Arts. They should be keeping those records already. This would just require them to share them, and then Kansas would also have access. So if we wanted to license someone.
So they're under the Board of Healing Arts. So
Yes.
those records, it would be important that those records were purged. I mean, I understand in a bill that we're going to be looking at that records are going to be void, and this is not voiding any records.
Yes, okay, I see what you are getting that. That would be Article 9. I can double check if there's any provisions in the compact about deletion of records. It just says that the member state shall submit a uniform data set to the system on all individuals to whom the compact is applicable. This is on page 14, including identifying information, licensure data, adverse actions against a licensee, denial of applications, and any other information that may facilitate the administration of this compact as determined by the rules of the commission.
So I don't think this is any uncommon for any other compacts, that usually the maintenance of records, and so it's important. Thank you.
I believe every compact has a data system article in it requiring the sharing of licensure and investigative information.
Thank you. Additional questions for Jenna? Seeing none, thank you, Jenna. We will move to our first proponent, Travis Growlholes, I hope. Oh, you want William to go first? Okay. William Wilk with the Kansas Chamber of Commerce.
First is the worst. That's what they say in elementary school, right? Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. William Wilk, Senior Director of Government Affairs for the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, and we appreciate the opportunity to provide proponent testimony to House Bill 2533, enacting the Occupational Therapist Licensure Compact. As you know, this compact would provide interstate practice privileges for occupational therapists wanting to practice in Kansas or expand their practice into Missouri, Colorado, Nebraska, or Oklahoma if they were to pass, obviously. Kansas has been regarded as a leader across the country in terms of passing occupational licensing compacts. The legislature passed 4 last year. To date, Kansas has passed 14 of the available 20 occupational licensing compacts. So these are great workforce bills. That's how we approach these issues, just to streamline the licensing process. And with that, I am happy to stand for questions on House Bill 2533.
Thank you, William. We'll wait for the rest of the conferees. And next we will have Travis. Do you want to go next? All right. Travis, I'm so sorry. We know each other, but I always say your name wrong.
Grauer Holtz.
Grauer Holtz. Okay, I didn't do badly.
Yeah, you did. You're very close. No, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I was going to have Will go first because we have been working with the chamber, and the chamber is the one that introduced this bill. My name is Travis Grauer Holtz. I'm appearing before you on behalf of the Kansas Occupational Therapists Association. KOT represents the occupational therapists and occupational therapists. More than 400 of them across the state and the region itself. Will did a good job, and the riser did a good job explaining the bill. You have my written testimony in front of you, so I won't go into too much, but I do want to kind of give another, props to the chamber. They've came to us early on this bill, had us in the early conversations to make sure we were comfortable with the bill. We think the end product is a great product, and we would respectfully ask the committee to support the bill. Happy to stand for questions.
Thank you. And now we'll move to Lieutenant General Keith Marshall from the National Kansas National Guard.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Lieutenant Colonel Keith Marshall with the Kansas Adjutant General's Department. My main takeaway for this bill is that this is a good bill for military families in Kansas. It addresses some of the unemployment and underemployment challenges that military spouses face as they move around the country from state to state. So we're working really hard to provide licensure portability in as many specialties as possible. And this is one more step in the process. William mentioned that, that we've passed 14 of these so far. So we're continuing to chip away at these and make moving around and entering the state of Kansas and coming into the workforce as seamless as possible for our military families. So with that, Madam Chair, I will stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, and this is the appropriate time. So committee, do we have any questions for any of the conferees? Senator Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know who wants to answer this, but normally if we're early adopters, we get a seat on the board, but we're, there are already 30 people who've signed off. So do you know if we'll have a seat on this board or input? Thank you.
Yes, William Welk with the Kansas Chamber. Madam Chair, Senator, we will get a seat on the commission. Just when you're an early adopter of the compact, you get a seat on the table to adopt the rules, the fees, et cetera, and bylaws. So we're just coming to the table, obviously late, but we'll still be on the commission.
Follow up, Madam Chair. So the bylaws and fees are already established then, and we're happy with what we see?
Yeah, they'd be established by the commission currently.
Thanks for your answer. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Additional questions, committee? Senator Petty.
I have a question for Travis. So Travis, the occupational therapists are under the Board of Healing Arts, correct? You mentioned there were 400 across the state. So currently, there, and as part of this, there has to be a maintenance of records about if there's any improprieties or any abuse of the license. Would that be correct?
Yeah, Travis Carholtz, Kansas occupational therapist, that would be correct. And the board would be the ones that would still handle those, so to say, issues, yeah.
Right, so they would, so the Board of Healing Arts would continue to do that, and that would be important as part of this compact, that those have to be available when they apply for a compact license. Would that be correct?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Additional questions, committee? I have one. We've seen, first of all, what do we hear from occupational therapists about that? I didn't see any of the proponent testimony regarding them themselves. How do they feel about the compact?
They think it's a great thing. We heard from quite a few of our members, not just in the Kansas City area, but across the state. There are individuals that they're working with on a daily basis. They move just like all of us. And when they move across the state, across that state line, they may want to keep that occupational therapist that's been working with them. But they can't unless they go and then get licensed within that state. So we've heard a lot of good things about this compact moving forward from our members, yes.
And when it comes to these compacts, all four of them, I always have two concerns, because oftentimes what can happen is, written in the context of the bill, is the tail wagging the dog, and they're telling the state what to do. And then the state gets in this situation of, well, the compact says we have to do X, Y, Z. Are there safeguards built into this?
I believe a lot of the state has still control over kind of, what our licensees are still doing, and those that are practicing in Kansas are still doing. As Will mentioned, a seat at the board is always a good thing too, because you can bring that Kansas voice to the board. If there are issues that, that are being across the nation that are heard, Kansas can still have their say, yes.
All right. And then one last thing, I'm looking at the fiscal note. The Board of Healing Arts is saying that there would increase fee fund expenditures. Can you explain that?
That I'm not well rehearsed on. That might be a better question for the Board of Healing Arts.
And is there anybody from the Board of Healing Arts here today?
So I'm not seeing.
Not today.
Yeah, not
Okay.
today. But we can definitely circle back with them and see if we can't come up with an answer.
And they mentioned that they would need to hire an individual to run this, and we often will hear that. And I'd like to reach out to them about, is that really necessary when you have 400, but are all of them going to join? And then I assume there's a fee to join.
Correct.
Right, to be part of the compact to
Correct.
help make up the difference in what it would add to the fiscal note?
Yeah, so you would have a fee to have your license in the state of Kansas, but then you would also be paying a fee to have a licensed compact. So you'd be paying both fees there. So it'd be one for the license for the compact and then one for the state. Yeah.
All right. Senator Petty?
Thank you. And my questions are also for Travis. So I would assume that the fee has to do with the additional work that's brought in by those not just in the state, but are coming into the state through the compact.
That would be my understanding. Again, that's probably a better question for the Board of Healing Arts, but my understanding would be is that, we're now allowing individuals to enter into the state of Kansas under the compact rules, so that wouldn't be that extra cost. But again, probably a better question for the Board of Healing Arts, yes.
But I do have another question. I know that it mentions, and I didn't quite understand what was meant by a remote state. Does that, when it says binding effective compact and other laws, it's under Article 14. It says about a remote state. Do you know what that means by remote state? I guess maybe I should be asking the revisor.
Yeah, that might be a question for the revisor.
Remote state's actually one of the defined terms, page 3, line 29. A member state other than the home state where you're exercising a compact privilege. So you live in Missouri, practice in Kansas. Kansas would be a remote state. Missouri would be your home state.
So, Jenna, just as a follow-up on that, so you said that if I'm an occupational therapist, I can only be licensed in one?
You will have one home state.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this will close the hearing on House Bill 2533. And you can see why we decided to have both of these hearings on the same day, because we have the same proponents. So we will now open the hearing on 2534, enacting the Respiratory Care Interstate Compact. And Jenna, would you give us a bill brief? Oh, Donica's giving us the bill brief. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Donica Short, Office of Revisor of Statutes. House Bill 2534 would enact the Respiratory Care Interstate Compact to provide interstate practice privileges to respiratory therapists, very similar to what you just heard. Article 1 states the purpose of the compact is to facilitate the interstate practice of respiratory therapy with the goal of improving public access to services. Article 2 provides definitions that are used throughout the compact. Article 3 provides the criteria for a state to participate. Those include licensing respiratory therapists, participating in the Commission's data system, having a mechanism in place for receiving and investigating complaints, complying with the Commission's rules, granting compact privileges to an active home state license holder, and completing criminal background checks. Article 4 sets forth the licensee's requirements to exercise the compact privilege. Those requirements include holding and maintaining an active home state license, maintaining a credential from the National Board of Respiratory Care, being free of adverse action within the previous 2 years, notifying the Commission if seeking the compact privilege within a remote state, and paying applicable fees. Article 5 provides that an active military member or their spouse shall designate a home state where the individual has a current license in good standing. It also states that a military member or their spouse shall not be required to pay a fee to the Commission. Article 6 outlines the authority of a member state to investigate or impose adverse actions on licensees. It further provides that any member state may participate with other member states in joint investigations of licensees. Article 7 establishes the Respiratory Therapy Care Compact Commission and sets forth the Commission's powers and duties. Article 8 requires the Commission to provide for the development, maintenance, operation, and utilization of a coordinated database and reporting system. Article 8 further requires member states to submit information to that data system. Article 9 requires that the Commission promulgate reasonable rules to implement and administer the provisions of the compact. Article 10 sets out the rules for oversight, default and termination, and dispute resolution. Article 11 states that the effective date of the Commission is upon passage in the 7th member state. It also provides for a state's withdrawal from an amendment of the compact. And legislation has passed in 5 states, and it's been introduced in a number of other states. Article 12 contains construction and severability clauses, which give instructions to a court interpreting the compact. Article 13 provides that nothing in the compact prevents or inhibits the enforcement of any other law or regulation in a member state that does not conflict with the compact. And the House committee made minor technical amendments to the bill. These include making state plural on page 7, amending reason on page 13 to read reason or reasons, changing except to provided on page 16, changing and to or on page 16, and a list of reasons the commission may adopt an emergency rule, and making states possessive by adding an apostrophe on page 19. HB 2534 passed the House on a vote of 121 to 0 and would take effect on July 1, 2026 upon publication in the statute book. I can now stand for any questions.
Any questions for Donica? Yes, Senator Petty.
Thanks, Donica. And so, just to confirm from my knowledge, so the respiratory therapists, they're under the Board of Healing Arts as well. You mentioned that on page 5, have not had any adverse actions against a license within the previous 2 years. So does that mean that the Board of Healing Arts would have to maintain a list of whether there have been any adverse actions brought against a license?
I might need to, I mean, I assume that the Board of Healing Arts maintains a list of adverse actions, and that they would share that with the commissioner, that they couldn't see compact privileges if they'd had an adverse action in the last 2 years. So,
Right,
yes.
so, I mean, this says have not had, so there has to be some way to check that.
Correct.
And so that would be that they would then have to maintain that.
Yes.
And in this case, it says within the previous 2 years. So if those records were null and void, would we be able to be under a compact?
The bill doesn't speak to it. I can't state that specifically.
I know from past compacts, we have to conform to whatever, to what from past compacts, we've had to conform in order to be part of compacts. So it appears it has to be in place. It mentions also on page 5, it says the compact privilege is valid until the expiration date or revocation of the home state license unless terminated pursuant to adverse actions. So then there is an expiration date for a license?
Yes, I believe so, unless it's renewed.
So they have both an expiration date and they have to renew it. So if they don't renew their license, are they considered a current practicing a respiratory therapist?
I'd have to review the specific statute in Chapter 65 regarding respiratory therapists, but it would make sense to me that if you do not renew your license, that your license is lapsed or expired or...
Yeah, if you could check that, I'd appreciate that.
Sure, absolutely.
Additional questions of Donica Committee? Seeing none, thank you. And now we will move to, I'm guessing, William Wilk. Welcome, William.
Thank you, Madam Chair. William Wilk, from Senior Director of the Kansas Chamber of Commerce. We appreciate the opportunity to provide proponent testimony to House Bill 2534 enacting the Respiratory Therapist Compact. I'll keep my comments very brief. You guys know what compacts are. I will say it is very important that these compacts remain the same with what the model language is, because that's what passes in other states. And so these compacts, they act as contractual agreements for other states to opt into. And so I have some just formatting and technical changes listed in my testimony. I thought we got all of them on the House side, but CSG reached out to me after this passed the House, and there was just a couple technical changes. They're listed in my testimony, and they're formatting. The biggest one I would say is on page 19, line 2, adding effective date to the end of the sentence. It'll read, "The compact shall come into effect on the date that the compact statute is enacted into law in the 7th member effective date." And with that, I'm happy to stand for questions on House Bill 2534.
Since there are only two of you, we could take the questions one at a time. Any questions for William, Committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, welcome back up, Lieutenant Colonel.
Morning again, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Lieutenant Colonel Keith Marshall with the Adjutant General's Department. And I'll just reiterate my testimony from the previous bill. There are no changes on this for me. A good bill for military families, and would urge your support and stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Questions for the Colonel, Lieutenant Colonel? Seeing none, thank you very much. Seeing no other comments or questions, this closes the hearing on House Bill 2534, and committee, we are adjourned.